Any advice and information from this podcast is general only. It has been prepared without taking into account your individual circumstances and needs. Before acting on any advice from this podcast, you should assess and seek advice on whether it is appropriate for your needs, financial situation, and investment objectives. Hello all, and welcome back to the podcast. We are now fully integrated into the podcast world. Apparently, Jessie and I's podcast, the first episode was a major hit. We might have had 3 listens in the first month. They might have come from Evergreen staff. But anyway, so we've decided to jump on the part 2 of topic 1, which is still on sort of the house purchasing side of things. From that, so just to recap on what we sort of talked about with part 1, it was more along sort of looking at your budget, some deposit amounts, some schemes that the government provides to sort of help you to get towards purchasing your first home. And now for this part 2, we are going to do a bit more discussion about what lender's mortgage insurance is, or LMI. The other sort of hidden costs about buying and owning your own home versus renting. So we're talking about things like just the hidden costs, legal fees, bank fees. If your aircon breaks down, you're the one paying for it, things like that.
And being the defense guru, Yannick?
I didn't want to say anything about it, but yeah.
And your background, you know, what can people look to access, I guess, when they're in defence and serving? Yeah,
look, good question. You outlined sort of the healthcare professional side, which is great. Yes, for defence members as well, there's additional incentives that are that can be funded by DVA as well, or Department of Veteran Affairs, that enables current serving members and former serving members different subsidies and allowances that help them sort of finance their home loan or start up with an initial lump sum. So if you're a serving member, there's a thing called HPAS, Home Purchase Assistance Scheme. So you've got to tick a few sort of criteria or eligibility boxes, but you can definitely ask your chain of command what those are and what the entitlements are. But essentially, Defence will pay you a lump sum taxable amount that can go towards your deposit of your first home. And
That's
then
amazing.
You've got... Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. It's a great thing. And it helps. It definitely helps serving members buy into a property. It depends. It can get a little bit tricky. As I mentioned, some of the caveats are, look, that you've got to sort of prove that you're going to do 12 months in that house, and that's tricky when you're in defence and you're sort of posting around the countryside. That's the upside of the defence side of things. You might do 2 or 3 years in a location, and then they're like, hey, we need you to move from Townsville to Brisbane or Townsville to sunny Puckapunyal. Shout out to all the Puckapunyalians down in sunny Victoria. But yeah, it is quite a sort of handy thing if it goes on top of their deposit. But the other one I mentioned, which is quite popular, is a thing called DOHAS, or Defence Home Ownership Assistance Scheme. So you do a small qualifying period, and from there, depends how long you serve in defence. And this is eligible. The eligibility is there for current serving members and veterans that have left the defence. But DVA, or essentially through DOHAS, will pay you a subsidy towards your home loan, tax-free, every month. Depending on the size of your home loan, look, the larger your home loan, there's a cap there, but you sort of get a larger subsidy. So it is quite handy. Think of it as additional reimbursement for living the defence life. Yeah, it definitely sort of helps. And there's some upsides and downsides to it. Upsides, it's an additional subsidy or additional income. Downsides is, look, at the moment there's only sort of 3 main banks that service that, and it's really up to you when you negotiate with the banks on the kind of rate you get with them. But hey, if you can earn an extra few dollars and it works out to be cheaper than you compared to other main banks, then by all means sort of jump on board.
And how do you know if you're eligible for DOHAS?
God, I think if you get in defence on day 1, you can do 100 push-ups. No, that's a joke. Don't listen to that. Look, you can either go through your chain of command if you're not sure about it. It's quite a daunting thing. Once you've joined the defence, you do all your basic training, you get posted to your unit, you're meeting all your new team members, you've got your chain of command there, you're just trying to sort of fit in. But if you're interested in that sort of stuff, as the longer you serve, you'll sort of pick up these things. They do heaps of induction courses to upload new entrance to the defence on what their entitlements are. But generally, with the DOHAS side of things, you've had to at least serve 2 years in the regular service.
Right.
From there's a website that's really handy. It's got a calculator on there that lets you sort of punch in, hey, I want to borrow $400,000. You can use that calculator to essentially enter those details or whatever loan amount you want, and it'll give you an estimate of the subsidy or the monthly subsidy you receive back, which is pretty handy. And the upside is it's not just to full-time or permanent ADF service members. There's also reserve members as well. So don't forget the reservists that do the additional work in between. They have some entitlements to the DOHAS as well. Check the website out. There it sort of outlines it updates relatively periodic on the amounts, the loan amounts that you covered for, the maximum subsidy amount you receive, how much time you need to serve to be eligible. There's heaps of links on the website. It shows you which banks you're entitled to. So by all means, have a look at that one. If you've got any questions, I can think of maybe only one financial advice place that can give you a real good hand on that. Evergreen. No.
Question. What
Go.
if you leave defence? Does it affect your DOHAS?
Oh, tell you what, I thought it was going to be an easy sort of day on the podcast life.
I'm going to challenge you this time.
Really good question. Yeah, it changes the goalposts a little bit if you, whether you administratively discharge or if you're medically transitioned. So if you administratively discharge, that's fine. You do X amount of years, you sort of build up these credits. So, and that also goes into the mold if you've done any qualifying service or I guess warlike service overseas, that kind of adds on years of credit to your DOHAS subsidy. But as a general rule of thumb, let's just say you did 10 years in the full-time Defence Force, and whether you're in or out, if you're in, they'll essentially use 2 years as your qualifying period. So you'll essentially have 8 years left of Tier 3 DOHAS subsidy. The goalposts also change a little bit if you leave defence and don't do any reserve time work. Your entitlements will essentially kind of stop at whatever your entitlement was when you left. So if you left at 10 years, you didn't do any reserve work or any more defence work, you'd only have 8 years left. But if you leave defence or full-time defence and you go into reserve work, if you're doing at least 20 reserve days a financial year, your entitlements will keep ticking over. You'll still be entitled to it. So it can keep your entitlements, can sort of keep ticking over. And then they'll let you know, by the way, when your subsidy is about to run out or where you are in sort of the entitlement area. It changes again if you medically discharge. If that happens, you'll essentially pretty much look. There's a lot of detail in there, but you'll pretty much sort of stay on your tier, generally speaking. And they'll essentially give you every month of service, you'll get a month of subsidy amounts there continuing on into the future.
Yeah, right.
So, it is a good thing. There's one little other sort of small entitlement there. DOHAS will let you lump sum a bit of your entitlement to help with your deposit or, whether it's paying for stamp duty or whatever. It only really works if you're buying your first home, but DOHAS will let you roll up 4 years of Tier 1 amount. You'll have to check the website for that one, and you can sort of add that as a cash payment. So it's a little handy tool there to kickstart it. So it's a good incentive if you add that in with the home purchase assistance scheme. There's a few $1,000s there that can help you sort of kickstart with that deposit. Because as we mentioned, that deposit amount isn't easy to sort of save up to.
No. So just to go back to LMI, I think we kind of grazed over that real quick.
We did brisk over it. Yes, we did.
Can you kind of tell us what LMI is and if it's applicable to us 25-year-olds?
I'm trying to cast my mind back to when I was 25. Did I know what LMI was? To some, it's a dirty word. To the banks, no, it's not. So LMI is Lender's Mortgage Insurance. It's essentially, as we mentioned, 20% is kind of like that, I guess that safety net figure that banks look at, because essentially they're the ones that are taking all the risk to lend you the money.
Yeah.
They're doing all the assessments like, hey, can this person or can these people service this loan? Yes, they've got a bit of cash there, but how's their income and how's their budget? Is more money going out than going in? LMI, if you haven't got that 20%, think of it like an insurance premium that you're paying. And what that means is for the bank, if you essentially default on the loan, and let's just say the bank has to sell the house on you to sort of recoup their funds, and the property or the asset value isn't worth as much as what you owed the bank, that's where the lender's mortgage insurance would come in. A third party is essentially the insurer, and they will then pay out the banks the X amount that they might have lost. It's sort of incorporated in your loan, as we mentioned, if you're under that 20%, but that's essentially sort of how it works. So it's the lender of the mortgage, it's insurance to cover them if they can't recoup their funds that they lent to you. So I guess the way I sort of look at it, Jessie, in the dream world, I'm going to lend you $100,000.
Okay.
Don't spend it all at once. But you don't have 20 grand as a 20% deposit. You've only got $10,000 as a deposit. So to get this loan, you're going to need to pay lender's mortgage insurance. That might cost you, say, maybe a couple of $1,000s. But that means now if next year you sort of default on the loan, I have to sell that $100,000 house, but it's only worth $50,000. Your loan amount at the time was $90,000. So I'm left, as the bank or as a lender, I'm left short $40,000. Lender's mortgage insurance will essentially sort of cover that amount, and it sort of gives the banks a bit of a warm and fuzzy. Sounds a bit daunting, but it's a real thing, and it's something either your bank lender or your mortgage broker, possibly even your financial advisor, is just going to have to chat to you about, especially if you're seriously considering buying a house, and if you're not sort of tracking towards that 20% figure. Anything below that, there's probably going to be discussions, or it's going to be on your contract about LMI. And by all means, if you Google it, I dare say some good information will come up. Does that help with the hard questions, Jessie? Can I knock off now? Is that?
It's knock off time. So just to recap, I guess we know now, what your deposit would be on a $400,000 house. It'd be $80,000.
Damn.
There's other schemes available, like the 5% first home guarantee scheme.
Yep, got to have 5% deposit. Yep, to entitle that one.
First home super saver scheme, if you want to, lock that money away in super and take advantage of that. If you work in the healthcare sector, you can get the 10% deposit. Should
have been a doctor.
No LMI. We know we've got all that available to us. I think we're set. We've got some idea. The only other thing I can think of is the other costs in buying a house. So,
what do you mean? I thought once that's it. Surely we're not. That's it. We've got a dream home. It's our first home. Everything's all well and good. Not paying any rent anymore. There's no apparent dead money going out.
Living the dream. But if you are a first home buyer, your stamp duty gets waived. But if you're not, and it varies state to state, there is a waiver up to a certain amount. If you buy a property less than X, then there is a bit of a waiver as well, depending on your state. Yeah, but there is stuff like you have to pay for a pest inspection prior to purchasing the property. Got to pay those pesky lawyers. No, shout out, they're great.
Yep, solicitor fees, everyone enjoys them, but it gets the legalities sort of, it ticks all the, or crosses all the T's, dots all the I's regarding sort of the purchase and the sale, transfer of deed for your property. That's the solicitor's sort of bag of goods there. Plus they sort of will check on if there's any outstanding or hidden debts there on the property as well that you don't want to encounter.
Yeah, so all up, you might have another 10K there. If you have stamp duty waived, it might be a bit more if you have stamp duty. So just to kind of account and think about that as well when you're saving for your first property, so you don't get a bit of a shock like most of us do.
Yeah, and I guess coming from like usually most people have rented before. I definitely have. Jessie, you have, or did you just grow up in a palace? No?
I've rented a lot, yeah.
Look, we know we're going to move from the rental side. You're going to buy your first place. no more rent, that's great. But once you buy your first place, as Jessie outlined, there's a heap of those fees there, those costs. So we mentioned those hidden costs. We don't want to scare anyone, but there's also sort of just one to be cognizant of, is once you have signed the contract to purchase your house, whether it's your first, second, or in Jessie's case, seventh. No, not really. No, real estate's not a thing. But insurance is something that you will need to consider, because once that contract is signed, legally it's essentially yours. So think of the home contents. There's plenty of insurers out there. Yeah. In Townsville or North Queensland, it is a bit more expensive than, say, down south. And we definitely see that a lot when we sort of talk to investors that have real estate properties. That's coming up on our 100th episode when we get to that very soon with our global demand. But definitely give insurance consideration. Get the quotes out there. If you bought a $400,000 property, there's plenty of online quotes that you can do, or ring your bank or ring some insurers to find out what you're looking at per year, because it's probably going to be in the thousands at least. So give that some consideration.
For sure.
All right, guys, thank you very much for listening on to Topic 1 Part 2, where we covered pretty much everything relating to what LMI is, or Lender's Mortgage Insurance, the other sneaky costs of owning your own home. And we also included a portion there, mostly relating to defence-related funding with buying your own home, and some of the incentives that are provided by the Australian Defence Force, whether you're still serving or have gotten out of the defence. Those entitlements still relate to you regarding owning and buying your own home. So thank you very much, and we'll see you later.